What do you do when you're face to face with someone who clearly doesn't like you? Do you shut down, fight back, or do you rise above it with quiet strength? In a world where reactions come fast and egos run high, the real power lies in how you carry yourself when respect isn't returned. This isn't about winning them over. It's about not losing yourself. Let's talk about how to stay grounded, graceful, and in control, even when the room turns cold. There are moments in life when you'll come face to face with someone who simply doesn't like you. Maybe they show it with passive-aggressive remarks, dismissive behavior, or cold indifference. Maybe it's subtle, or maybe it's loud and obvious. Either way, it can feel personal. It can dig under your skin, challenge your confidence, and tempt you to shift who you are in an effort to be accepted. But the truth is, the goal in these interactions isn't to be liked. The goal is to stay rooted in who you are. It's easy to get caught in the trap of seeking validation. That internal voice starts whispering, if I'm just a little nicer, maybe they'll change their mind. If I prove myself, if I explain my side, if I show them how good I am, maybe they'll come around. But that mindset is exhausting. It places your self-worth in the hands of someone who already decided not to see your value. You end up bending and twisting into versions of yourself that aren't authentic, all to win over someone who doesn't want to be won. What if the win isn't about their approval, but about your alignment with yourself? What if the conversation is less about changing their perspective and more about holding your ground with grace? When you stop focusing on being liked and start focusing on being whole, everything shifts. You're not showing up to convince them of anything. You're showing up so that when the conversation is over, you can look in the mirror and respect the way you handled yourself. Talking to someone who doesn't like you challenges your emotional discipline. Your nervous system may want to go into fight or flight. You may want to defend, attack, or retreat. But what happens when you choose to stay steady instead? When you prioritize emotional regulation over emotional reaction, you reclaim control, not over the other person, but over your own experience. The key is recognizing that your energy belongs to you. You don't have to give it away just because someone else is throwing shade. You don't have to over-explain, over-apologize, or over-perform. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is your calm presence. Sometimes the best defense is no defense, just self-assurance that doesn't require external approval. Imagine being in a room with someone who clearly doesn't support you, and you still walk tall. You speak with clarity. You listen without absorbing their negativity. You answer questions without needing to control how they perceive you. That's not weakness. That's quiet power. It comes from knowing that your peace doesn't depend on their opinion. You no longer need to be understood by them to understand yourself. Letting go of the need to be liked creates freedom. You become less reactive. You start to engage with curiosity instead of defensiveness. You begin to ask yourself better questions. What do I want from this conversation? How do I want to feel after this interaction? What kind of person do I want to be, even in the presence of tension? These questions guide you back to your center. It's also important to acknowledge the discomfort. There's no pretending it doesn't sting when someone treats you with dislike. But strength doesn't mean numbing that feeling. It means not being controlled by it. You can acknowledge the weight without carrying it. You can feel the rejection without absorbing it into your identity. It's okay to feel it. Just don't let it dictate your behavior. Being around someone who doesn't like you gives you a choice. You can either shrink to fit their expectations or expand into your truth. You can allow the energy of the room to determine your posture, or you can decide to stand in your integrity, no matter who is watching. This doesn't mean being arrogant or dismissive. It means being grounded. There's a quiet confidence in knowing you don't have to fight for space that's already yours. The way you talk to someone who doesn't like you should reflect your values, not their mood. That means you speak with clarity even if they're vague. You remain respectful even if they're rude. You stay composed even if they're agitated. Why? Because your behavior isn't a reaction. It's a reflection of your standards. You're not matching their energy. You're maintaining your own. Conversations like these also teach you boundaries. You begin to understand where your emotional limits are. Maybe you learn that you don't need to give unlimited access to people who misuse it. Maybe you realize that it's okay to say less. Maybe you discover that silence can be more powerful than 1,000 explanations. Boundaries aren't walls to shut people out. They're doors to protect your peace. And sometimes the most profound growth happens in these moments. When you stop trying to be liked, you start being free. You free yourself from needing their nod of approval to validate your worth. You free yourself from the weight of constantly performing for acceptance. You free yourself to just be honest, calm, unshaken. You're not here to change their mind. You're here to check in with your own. You're here to make sure that even when disliked, you're not disliking yourself in the process, that you're not abandoning your values to make room for their criticism, that you're not dimming your light to fit into their shadow. The conversation may not change them. They may still walk away with the same opinions. But the real victory is when you walk away feeling proud of how you handled yourself. That's the win. Not in the outcome, but in your presence. Not in their reaction, but in your response. Not in being liked, but in being aligned with the kind of person you're becoming. When someone treats you with hostility, indifference, or passive aggression, the first instinct is often to mirror their energy. It feels like a defense mechanism. If they're cold, you become colder. If they raise their voice, you raise yours. If they ignore you, you ignore them harder. It becomes a game of emotional ping pong, and every reaction feels justified in the name of protecting yourself. But that cycle doesn't bring peace. It doesn't give clarity. It just drags you down to a level you never intended to operate from. And in the end, you lose your grip on the one thing that actually gives you power: control over yourself. Mastering your energy isn't just about staying calm. It's about knowing what your energy is before someone else tries to pull you into theirs. It's about developing emotional discipline that doesn't fluctuate based on someone's attitude toward you. When you walk into a room, your tone, your presence, and your responses should be grounded in your identity, not their approval or rejection. You don't need to rise to provocation or sink to silence. You choose your response like you choose your outfit, with intention. There's strength in stillness, not the kind of stillness that avoids or shuts down, but the kind that absorbs the chaos around you without becoming part of it. When someone comes at you with negativity, they often expect, even want, you to lash out. They expect you to crack, to stumble, to retaliate. But when you remain composed, it disarms them. It shifts the dynamic, not because you're trying to manipulate the situation, but because you've already decided, my peace is mine and I won't hand it over just because someone else is uncomfortable in theirs. It takes a certain level of maturity to respond without reacting. Anyone can snap back. Anyone can throw shade. But true strength is measured by how well you hold yourself when someone else is trying to shake you. When you choose not to take their bait, you protect your integrity. When you choose to pause instead of pounce, you protect your clarity. There's a power in silence, in breath, in saying, I don't need to respond to every jab, especially when it costs me my calm. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It doesn't mean pretending everything is okay when it's not. It means acknowledging what's happening, feeling it fully, but refusing to let it define your behavior. Emotional intelligence doesn't make you passive. It makes you strategic. It teaches you how to express, not explode, how to speak truth, not just vent anger, how to set boundaries without burning bridges. Mastering your energy also means you stop chasing closure from people who thrive on chaos. Not everyone wants resolution. Some people want reaction. They want to pull you into their narrative so they can continue feeling powerful, righteous, or validated. But when you stop playing along, you shift from being their opponent to being an observer. You watch, you assess, you choose, not from impulse but from intention. That kind of emotional strength is developed, not inherited. It comes from experience, reflection, and a willingness to grow through discomfort. It means looking at your own patterns and asking, Why do I feel the need to prove myself to someone who clearly isn't open to understanding me? It means recognizing when your energy is being drained and having the courage to pull it back without guilt. Not every comment deserves a response. Not every glare requires a defense. Sometimes your greatest move is to keep your tone steady and your message clear, even when theirs is clouded with judgment. The idea isn't to become emotionless, it's to become emotionally to know what's yours to carry and what's theirs to project, to differentiate between actual disrespect and perceived slights. Sometimes people's behavior has less to do with you and more to do with their own inner battles. And when you internalize their energy, you start fighting wars that were never meant to be yours in the first place. Responding with emotional maturity doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've chosen not to let someone else control your narrative. It means you've prioritized your peace over your pride. Because pride will push you to respond fast and loud. Peace, on the other hand, will push you to respond wisely and well. It tells you you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to match their storm. You are the calm. There will be situations where your silence is misunderstood as weakness. Let them misunderstand. There will be moments when your lack of retaliation is seen as submission. Let them assume. You don't need to prove your strength to someone who doesn't even see your worth. That's not your job. Your job is to stay grounded, to walk away with dignity, and to know that you honored yourself in the process. When you master your energy, conversations become less about control and more about clarity. You listen not just to respond, but to understand. You speak not just to be heard, but to be respected, first by yourself, then by others. You create space between what they say and how you respond. That space is where growth lives. That space is your power. And the beauty is, once you learn how to master your energy in tough conversations, you start applying that strength everywhere, in meetings, in family tension, in friendships. You stop being emotionally hijacked by other people's moods. You start leading with consistency, not just charisma. You start communicating with intention, not just reaction. This shift in mindset liberates you from the exhausting dance of trying to please, prove, or provoke. Instead of mirroring the energy in front of you, you reflect the standard within you. You no longer feel the need to fight for validation or acceptance because you're secure in who you are, regardless of the noise around you. So next time you're faced with someone who tries to rattle your foundation, remember this: your power lies in the pause, in the breath before the reaction, in the clarity that comes from choosing your response, not surrendering it. That's how you lead with strength. That's how you walk away with peace. Every conversation carries a tone, an unspoken energy that defines the interaction before a single word is spoken. Sometimes it's warm, sometimes cold, sometimes tense, and sometimes indifferent. When you walk into a situation where someone clearly doesn't like you, the tone is often already set, charged with discomfort, guardedness, or even quiet hostility. And the natural instinct might be to match it, to meet tension with tension, to return coldness with distance. But the real power lies in realizing that you are not obligated to match the tone. You have the ability to set it. Setting the tone is about owning the energy you bring into the room. It's recognizing that your presence, your pace, and your posture can influence the emotional temperature of a conversation, regardless of where the other person stands. When you're intentional with your tone, you take control of the atmosphere without ever raising your voice or changing your words. You influence without aggression, and you lead without force. Tension thrives in reaction. It feeds off emotional reactivity. Raised voices, sharp retorts, sarcastic comebacks, or pointed silence. When two people are locked in emotional defense, communication becomes a battlefield. Each person listens only to respond, not to understand. Each sentence becomes a jab, each pause a power move. But what happens when you step back and choose a different route? What if instead of leaning into the tension, you replace it with clarity, calmness, and control? It starts with awareness. You have to be able to walk into that space and notice the emotional charge, feel the tightness in the air, hear the guarded tone, see the closed-off body language, but instead of being pulled into it, you name it internally and then ground yourself. You remind yourself that you have a choice: to escalate, to absorb, or to anchor. Being the one who sets the tone doesn't mean being fake or overly polite. It means being steady. It means staying rooted in your values even when others abandon theirs. It means showing up with clarity, not confusion, with patience, not pressure, with boundaries, not bitterness. And this isn't about being soft. It's about being strong enough to remain consistent in the face of resistance. When someone doesn't like you, their tone may carry subtle or direct signals of rejection. Dismissive body language, condescending remarks, defensive responses. It's easy to want to push back, to demand respect, to force understanding, but that only fuels the fire. Instead, when you speak clearly and calmly, you disarm, not for the sake of being passive, but because you've chosen not to let their energy write your script. Setting the tone often means slowing the pace. When someone is on edge, they may speak quickly, interrupt, or rush to conclusions. You, however, can pause, you can breathe, you can allow space between their words and your response. That space is where wisdom lives. That space tells the other person, I'm not here to battle, I'm here to build clarity. Whether or not they accept that is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to remain composed and clear. It's important to understand that tone is more than just vocal inflection. It's the total experience of how you show up. It's your eye contact, your posture, your pace, your presence. If your energy says, I'm here to argue, then the conversation becomes war. But if your energy says, I'm here to communicate, then you create a chance, even a small one, for resolution, or at least respectful distance. There is a powerful difference between responding to conflict and reacting to it. Reaction is impulsive, it's emotional, it's often regretful. Response is thoughtful, it's measured, it's rooted in strength. And in difficult conversations, especially with people who don't like you, your ability to respond instead of react sets the tone for everything that follows. You may not always be met with understanding. The other person may remain defensive, closed off, or hostile. But when you hold your tone, you hold your power. You leave the conversation knowing that you stayed true to yourself, that you didn't get pulled into emotional quicksand, that you didn't abandon your dignity for a temporary win, because shouting louder doesn't make your point stronger, and silence soaked in resentment doesn't make you any more in control. Clarity is what matters. Composure is what lasts. There's also value in recognizing when to exit the conversation altogether. Setting the tone isn't about enduring disrespect. It's about deciding how you show up, and that includes choosing when to walk away. Sometimes the strongest tone you can set is the one that says, this space no longer deserves my energy. But even then, how you leave matters. Leave with composure, leave with your voice steady, leave knowing you didn't contribute to the chaos. In setting the tone, you teach people how to engage with you. You establish the rules of emotional engagement, not with force, but with consistency. If you meet negativity with calm firmness over and over again, people learn that they can't rattle you. They learn that you're not here to play emotional games, and those who continue to bring chaos will often fall away, not because you fought them off, but because they can't thrive where drama doesn't live. Your tone is your signature. It communicates your values before your words do. It speaks for you when emotions try to take over. It's your emotional leadership, and when you set the tone, calmly, clearly, and consistently, you shift the entire dynamic, not by overpowering, but by grounding. You lead not through dominance, but through direction. You don't need to control the conversation, you just need to control your contribution to it. There's something deeply empowering about walking into a room with tension and choosing not to carry it on your back, about choosing to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. You don't just reflect the environment, you influence it. And that influence doesn't come from loudness. It comes from emotional certainty. It comes from knowing who you are, how you communicate, and what kind of space you're willing to participate in. In difficult conversations, tone becomes your boundary. It's the shield that protects your peace, the compass that guides your words, the anchor that keeps you from drifting into chaos. And once you learn how to set it, deliberately and authentically, you never feel powerless in communication again. Because while you can't control how someone feels about you, you can always control how you show up in the room. Respect is not a transaction. It is not something you offer only when it's offered to you first. It is not a reward for good behavior, nor is it a fragile currency that breaks the moment someone fails to meet your standards. Respect is a reflection of who you are. When someone doesn't like you, when they treat you with disregard, when they show you their dislike in both subtle and direct ways, that's the moment your character is tested, not theirs. It's easy to be kind to those who are kind in return. It's easy to be gracious when the other person mirrors your energy, validates your presence, and acknowledges your efforts. But the challenge lies in maintaining that grace when none of it is reciprocated, when someone meets your kindness with coldness, when your openness is met with closed doors, when your presence is met with judgment or silence. Those are the moments that define not what you deserve, but who you are. Respecting someone who disrespects you doesn't mean accepting poor treatment. It doesn't mean making excuses for their behavior or staying in toxic situations. What it does mean is choosing not to lower yourself to their level. It means not letting someone else's immaturity pull you into reactionary behavior. When you remain respectful in the face of disrespect, you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for yourself. You're protecting your own standards. You're standing guard over your own emotional home. It's often misunderstood that keeping things respectful is a form of weakness or submission, as if being calm and collected somehow signals that you've given up or conceded. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Staying respectful when it's not returned is one of the hardest things to do. It takes self-awareness, it takes restraint, and it takes a level of emotional intelligence that many never develop. You are choosing to lead yourself even when no one else is modeling leadership. The way you carry yourself in difficult conversations sends a message. It tells the other person, and more importantly, it reminds you that your values are not conditional. You don't become rude because someone else was. You don't become dismissive because they decided to shut down. You don't match coldness with cruelty, because when you do that, you abandon the very integrity you've worked so hard to build. And no moment of temporary satisfaction is worth compromising the consistency of your character. There's strength in saying less, in listening even when you're not being heard, in speaking with clarity even when you're being talked over, in walking away not because you couldn't win the argument, but because winning meant losing yourself. That kind of quiet strength is not easily shaken. It doesn't rely on approval. It doesn't need applause. It stands on its own because it knows how I treat people says more about me than it ever will about them. Holding respect in one-sided situations isn't about pretending everything is okay. It's not about being naive to someone's dislike. It's about being so solid in your own identity that you don't let someone's attitude become your mirror. When you treat someone with dignity, even if they don't return it, you stay in alignment with your higher self. That alignment is where peace lives, not in control, not in revenge, in alignment. It also creates emotional clarity. When you engage with someone who doesn't like you and you keep things respectful, you leave the situation with no regrets. You're not up at night replaying what you could have said, should have said, or wish you hadn't said. You walk away knowing you handled it the best you could. You showed up with presence. You didn't get pulled into unnecessary drama. And even if the other person remains unchanged, you walk away unchanged, untainted by the negativity they tried to throw your way. Respect doesn't mean silence in the face of harm. It doesn't mean you don't stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean allowing others to take advantage of your kindness. On the contrary, it means setting boundaries with clarity. It means saying no without venom. It means walking away without destruction. That's what makes it powerful. Because when you maintain respect while also maintaining your boundaries, you become untouchable. Not emotionally cold, but emotionally steady. You begin to realize that your tone, your words, your reactions, they're all within your control. And when you protect those, you protect your peace. You start having fewer conversations that spiral into arguments. You start walking away from people who want chaos and aren't ready for calm. You start making choices that are rooted in emotional maturity, not momentary impulse. And slowly you build a version of yourself that can walk into any room, face any person, and still operate with integrity, regardless of how you're treated. That's not being fake. That's being free. Because once you understand that your respect is yours to offer and not theirs to earn, you become untouchable in a different kind of way. Not in the sense that people can't reach you emotionally, but in the sense that they can't shake you. They can't make you abandon your identity. They can't lure you into emotional traps. They can't manipulate you into behavior that doesn't serve you. You take the high road, not because you're better than anyone else, but because you're better than the version of yourself who used to take the low one. Eventually, people notice. Maybe not right away, maybe not ever, but what matters is that you notice. You begin to feel proud of the way you navigate conflict. You stop fearing hard conversations because you know how to hold your center. You stop worrying about being liked by everyone and start focusing on liking the way you show up in the world. It's tempting to believe that power comes from being loud, from winning arguments, from calling someone out, but true power often comes from doing the opposite, from staying calm, from choosing not to retaliate, from letting your self-respect speak louder than your ego ever could. That's the kind of power that doesn't fade after the conversation ends. It stays with you. It becomes your new baseline. It becomes your standard. And once you raise it, you don't lower it just because someone else refuses to meet you there. And that's the lesson. The way you communicate with people who don't like you isn't about them. It's about you. It's about the person you choose to be in the moments that matter most, because anyone can be kind when it's easy. Anyone can be calm when they're liked. But when you can still be respectful, even when the room is heavy with tension, that's when you know you're operating from a place of real, unshakable strength.